We're going to do one of the homework problems here. The one I have is for Locke and Ashina, and they can produce squash or maize. Okay, so here we go. Locke can produce 5 pounds of squash or 5 pounds of maize. So Ashina can produce 8 pounds of squash and 4 pounds of maize per acre. Now, it'd be best if you went to the problem. This is one of the homework problems, and this is it's number 2, I guess, as it's presently situated. So, anyway, now, before you graph this, and I suggest you graph it, you got to write this stuff down on a piece of paper, actually. Otherwise, you'll make a mistake. I guarantee it. You know what? I admit it. I kind of rushed through this, kind of doing it because I was in a hurry and I wanted to post this. Guess what? I got the reciprocal of the answer. And that often happens if you're not careful. When you're dealing with ratios, you can get the reciprocal of the right answer. So these are really easy to screw up, so they require patience. Now, what we have to remember, though, however, in this production possibilities curve, it does say in the problem, they each own 16-acre lots of land. Now, this is per acre, it says. So I think it'd be simpler right now to convert this to the total output. So 5 pounds of squash on 16 acres, or 5 pounds per acre, and then 16 acres. So you multiply that by 16, okay, and that gives us 80. And the same here, times 16 equals 80. So those are the numbers we're going to use on our production possibilities curves. Ashina, on same thing, multiply it by 16. 8 times 16 is 128. And 4 times 16 is 64. So that's what we want to graph. So here we go. And this will be a Locke's graph. Now on the problem, they want you to pull the graph it on the same graph. And one color is Locke's and one color is Ashina's. But it doesn't make any difference. You've got 2 different colors. You just drag it over. And here, well, let's see. I'll stop talking and start thinking. Ashina. Okay. And they've got maize on this axis. Squash here. Okay, so Locke can do 80 squash or 80 maize. So just put it here, 80, 80. There's Locke's production possibilities. And Ashina can do 128 squash or 64 maize. Okay, so there's 64 maize and 128 squash. Okay, there's Ashina's production possibilities. Okay, so we can see right now that who has the absolute advantage in squash? Well, we can see that Ashina can produce more squash for the same inputs. The input is 16 acres of land. So Ashina has the absolute advantage in squash, but Locke has the absolute advantage in maize. So we got 80 versus 64. Okay? Now, as far as the opportunity cost, who has a comparative advantage? Well, Let's see. Let's set this up. Change in squash over change in maize. Okay, so if we're going to produce maize, 80 units of maize is going to require Locke to give up 80 units of squash. So we know that 80 maize cost 80 squash. So we divide that through, and that becomes a 1. Of course, 80 divided by 80. So one maize costs 1 squash. For Locke, well, let's do that here. For Ashina, well, 64 maize. Going to have to give up 128 squash. So 64 maize cost 128 squash. Divide through because we want to know what 1 maize costs, and that equals 2. So one maize costs 2 squash. Now, let's just flip this over. Take the reciprocal. And of course, the reciprocal of 1 is 1, so nothing changes there. One squash costs 1 maize. And the same here for Ashina. And that becomes the reciprocal of this becomes a half. 1 divided by 2 is 0.5. So 1 squash costs 0.5 maize. So now we've got all the information we need to do this. I mean, we can drag the production possibilities curves over, and we can ask who has the absolute advantage in squash, who has the absolute advantage in maize. You got the answers to that. It says Locke's opportunity cost of producing 1 pound of maize is, and so you've got all those answers. Got all those answers right here. Okay. So that is that one.